She didn't shout. She didn't beg. She simply stood on the porch her family had owned for generations until they put her in handcuffs. Evelyn Monroe, 74, was arrested without a word read to her. But someone was watching. A 10-year-old with a camcorder. A bookseller who remembered. And miles away, in a military base half a world from Georgia, her son saw everything. What happened on that quiet street would soon ripple far beyond Haddonridge and turn one silent act of defiance into a national reckoning. The police didn't even read her rights. They just told Evelyn Monroe to step aside or be removed. She didn't move. She had stood her ground once before, in 1968, on this very street. But back then, she wasn't alone. The morning in Riverside Crossing was neither warm nor cold. It was the kind of Georgia autumn that whispered through porches and rusted fences without quite settling in. Evelyn Monroe stepped onto the splintered wood of her front porch in a faded green coat, her sign held with both hands. "This land remembers us," it read in blocky, hand-painted letters. Across the cracked asphalt, the steel teeth of a backhoe waited. Its engine idled low, a mechanical growl in the background, like something sizing her up. The sheriff's cruiser pulled up without urgency. Sheriff Wade Colborn stepped out, his uniform stiff as the morning air, boots clicking against concrete. He didn't look at Evelyn right away. He looked at the men already in place. Deputies spaced evenly along the sidewalk, construction workers lingering with clipboards. "Mrs. Monroe," he said finally, "the notice to vacate expired at midnight." Evelyn didn't answer. She lowered the sign to her side and looked past him, down the street that had once been her whole world. Colborn adjusted his cuff. "You're trespassing now, ma'am. We need you to comply." "I'm standing on my own porch," she said. "That porch, ma'am, belongs to the Haddonridge Development Authority." Silence. On the porch across the street, 10-year-old Caleb Jones had paused mid-bite on a piece of toast. His phone trembled slightly in his hands as he held it upright, recording. Next door, Grace Odell parted the blinds of her dusty bookstore, then opened the door fully. She held an old Sony camcorder, the kind with a faint click when you pressed record. She didn't say a word, didn't wave or call out. She just aimed the camera like a witness signing her name. Colborn gave a single nod. Two deputies approached. No raised voices, no weapons drawn. Just hands. Firm, practiced, impersonal. They took the sign from Evelyn's grasp like they were removing trash from the sidewalk. She didn't resist. She didn't curse. She only turned her head slightly, just enough for the camera to catch the look in her eyes. They didn't scream. They remembered. As the handcuffs clicked shut, the backhoe fell silent. Not because it was ordered to. It just did. The footage was online by nightfall. Grace had uploaded it to 3 local Facebook groups, 2 community watchdog forums, and 1 YouTube channel that she hadn't updated since the Obama inauguration. Caleb's video, though, was the one that caught fire. The angle was closer, the quality rougher, the kind of raw that cut through noise. Somewhere in Iraq, under fluorescent lights and humming AC vents, Lieutenant Ramirez stepped into the briefing room of Outpost Hammer and crossed to the cot where Staff Sergeant Malik Monroe sat cleaning his sidearm. "Ghost 6, Ramirez said, handing over a military-grade tablet. "This came from HQ. Thought you'd want to see it." Malik wiped his hands on a towel before taking the tablet. He tapped the screen once. The video buffered, then played. Caleb's voice was audible in the background, shaky, whispering his mother's name once before going silent. The footage zoomed in just as Evelyn's wrists were pulled behind her back, her shoulders set but unmoving, eyes locked on the camera. Malik didn't blink. He didn't ask questions. He set the tablet down. "Give me clearance for a 2-week leave," he says. The bus driver barely glanced at him. Just another man in a hoodie, stepping off at a forgotten Georgia stop. When Malik left Haddonridge, he said he'd never come back without a coffin or a purpose. This wasn't the former. The cracked sidewalk leading from the depot to Main Street had changed less than Malik expected. Potholes were patched with gravel, not pride. The banners strung across lampposts promised a downtown revival, bold reds and whites proclaiming, "Coming soon, Riverside shops." But the diners had closed. The post office now hosted a vape shop, and the old church marquee read, "Forgive us our debts, except property tax." He didn't linger. Just the quiet rhythm of boots on pavement, a go-bag slung over one shoulder, and a folded envelope tucked inside his jacket. Inside it, the printout of Caleb's video, screenshots, dates. On the envelope, Grace Odell's address, Her shop hadn't changed either. The bell above the door still jingled with defiance, and the scent hit him instantly: paper, lemon oil, and cinnamon. A smell that made time fold like laundry. She was already waiting behind the counter, hair tied back in a blue scarf, the same camcorder beside a steaming mug of tea. 12 hours, she said softly. It took 12 hours for that footage to hit 17,000 shares. Malik didn't speak. He stepped forward and placed the envelope on the counter. Grace slid a drawer open and pulled out a small box. Inside, yellowed documents, folded photos, and a slim black USB. "This wasn't just about your mama," she said. "This neighborhood's been marked for erasure since '98. You think Colborn's smart enough to do this alone?" He picked up the photo on top. His mother in front of a church picnic table, wearing the same church shoes she'd been arrested in. His younger self stood nearby, mouth full of cornbread, hand tugging at her dress hem. She had looked so strong to him then, not because she smiled, but because she didn't need to. At the Haddonridge Detention Center, Officer Derek Travers leaned against the desk, watching the feed from cell 04A. Evelyn Monroe sat upright on the bench, hands folded neatly, not touching the tray of untouched food beside her. Her posture didn't defy. It endured, and that was worse. "You can file this under passive resistance," Colborn's voice crackled from the hallway, clipboard in hand. "But make it clean. Don't mention her son. Don't mention the porch. Just a trespasser. Squatter if you want." Travers hesitated. "Sir, it was her house." Colborn smiled, not looking up. "Was. Now it's paperwork. You want to stay long in this department. You learn the difference." Grace watched Malik flip through the pages, one by one. "That USB has emails, land registry changes, pressure campaigns. But this—" She pulled out a folded handbill from the bottom of the box. "This is what started it. Project Eden." "Sounds like a church group," Malik muttered. "It's not. It's what they call the redevelopment plan." He nodded once and turned to leave. "I'll start with the timestamps." Night had fallen by the time Malik stood in front of the boarded house, a hollow rectangle of darkness where his mother's porch light used to glow. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded note, creased neatly, and slid it between the door slats. "I saw." His hand lingered for a moment on the wood, rough with old paint. Then he turned back toward the shadows. Inside a sparse motel room, lit only by the blinking cursor of his laptop, Malik entered the last of the council login credentials he'd harvested. The system cracked open faster than he expected. Years of lazy security. He found it under budget revisions, not bolded, just buried. Project Eden, Phase 4. Authorization, WC, PLMT. Target sites, RSC-09, Riverside Crossing, E-Row Housing Block, Monroe Parcel. Time frame, Q4 2023, expedited due to acquisition delays. Below that, a list of internal memos, redacted names, but one timestamp matched the night Evelyn was arrested. Another matched Caleb's upload time. Across town, under a flickering streetlight, a black SUV with government plates eased to a stop 2 houses down from Grace Odell's store. The engine idled quietly. No one stepped out. Not yet. Sheriff Colborn sat in his leather chair, sipping coffee from a mug that read "Local Legend," unaware he was being recorded. Grace once told Malik, "When systems rot, they squeak before they snap." The sheriff's office smelled like bleach and arrogance. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Colborn leaned back, legs crossed, scanning a memo he barely read. The mug trembled slightly in his hand, not from nerves, but from the old air conditioner kicking in. He didn't notice the faint click behind the mounted photograph of his retirement planning golf trip, or the tiny red dot now pulsing inside the hollow clock on the wall. The camera wasn't Malik's work. It was Travers's. Down Route 9, tucked behind a shuttered car wash, Malik sat in a nondescript motel room, its wallpaper peeling at the seams. A corkboard leaned against the dresser, covered in hand-drawn maps and arrows. On the desk, a laptop hummed with quiet urgency. Grace had sent the new drop that morning, a flash drive, wrapped in a napkin from the bakery. Inside were blueprints, digital receipts, and most damning of all, drone footage timestamped 2 weeks before Evelyn's arrest, showing Colborn walking with a group of suited men past the Monroe parcel, pointing with deliberate authority. Grace had included no note, just one photo at the end. A newspaper clipping from 2005 with Colborne's smiling face, handshaking a governor under the headline Revitalization Hero. Malik clicked through financial records. Shell companies. Eden Properties, LLC. A Delaware P.O. box. Payments routed through nonprofits that didn't exist 3 years ago. Every move they made was clean, unless you knew where to look. That afternoon, at a chipped Formica booth in Benny's Diner, Rachel Chen scrolled through a file list on a USB she'd found tucked inside her morning paper. No return address. No sender. But she recognized Grace's way of sealing envelopes. Crooked flap, tape folded twice. She muttered under her breath, "You paranoid saint." The files were gold. Internal communications. Tax abatements for Eden Properties. A Phase 5 map that included a line drawn through a park named after Evelyn's late husband. She was so focused, she didn't see the rookie officer walk past her car until he dropped the envelope on her windshield without breaking stride. Rachel slipped it open. Inside, Evelyn Monroe's full arrest report. Not the sanitized one Colborne's office released to the press, but the unredacted version, complete with officer comments and time discrepancies. Handwritten at the bottom, "You didn't hear this from me." Back in the motel, Malik snapped a photo of a man with mirrored sunglasses loitering across from Grace's bookstore. No badge, no phone, just watching. He emailed the photo to Grace. Her response was one line, "Tell Rachel she's in season." That evening, Grace, Rachel, and Malik sat in the bookstore's back room. The light flickered as they passed pages, highlighted segments, and pinned new names to the board. Rachel stirred instant coffee with a pen cap. "We've got enough to burn down a mayoral campaign." Malik didn't look up. "This isn't about campaigns." She nodded. "Then let's make it about land." Travers, meanwhile, had begun to feel the squeeze. Officer Harris, 10 years in, eyes tired, caught him at the copier. "You didn't see this from me," Harris said, sliding a folder across the table. "But something's coming. Be on the right side of it." Back at the motel, Malik launched a brute force entry into Colborne's private municipal inbox. He expected arrogance. What he didn't expect was simplicity. The message was 2 words. No header, no footer, just, "It's time." He stared at the screen. A moment passed. Then, another. He didn't move, just took in the finality of the words. Across town, Rachel's phone buzzed. Unknown number. No name. Just text. "Back up everything. You're on the list." Evelyn Monroe didn't speak a word in court. She didn't have to. The footage spoke for her. The Haddonridge County Courthouse had once been the pride of a growing town, its grand rotunda ceiling now dulled with soot and silence. Its outer facade still bore the eagle crest, weathered and flaking. Inside, the hallway lights buzzed weakly above rows of folding chairs dragged in for the media overflow. The day had started warm for November, but now clouds were rolling in, thick and heavy, like something was coming undone. Evelyn sat alone at the defendant's table, dressed in her pressed navy suit, hands folded neatly on the oak surface. Her eyes remained forward. Not on the crowd, not on the cameras, not even on Colborne. Judge Franklin Tully adjusted his glasses as he reviewed the docket. His reputation was that of a cautious man, allergic to scandal, but not necessarily blind to truth. "Mrs. Monroe," he said, his voice carrying a southern weariness, "you are here today charged with obstruction of municipal operations. How do you plead?" Evelyn offered nothing. Her court-appointed attorney rose, cleared his throat, and replied, "Your Honor, my client enters no plea today. We request to proceed directly to evidentiary review." It was unorthodox. But so was what followed. By lunch recess, the courtroom murmured. Rachel Chen had taken a seat in the second row, her worn leather notepad already filled with bullet points. As she quietly slipped out, her phone pinged. The article had gone live. Within minutes, the courthouse buzzed. Rachel had published everything. Financial links between Eden Properties and Colborne's office, drone footage of land appraisals months before public notices were issued, and most damning of all, the full video of Evelyn's arrest, uploaded in crisp resolution. Judge Tully's clerk returned to the bench looking pale. The afternoon session resumed with the quiet unease of something shifting. Rachel sat straighter, watching every flicker of the judge's expression. Malik stood in the back of the courtroom, his military ID tucked deep in his pocket. He didn't move. Caleb Jones was sworn in. He looked too small for the witness box, his legs swinging above the floor. For a moment he stared at his sneakers. "Do you remember what you saw that morning?" the attorney asked. He nodded. "The men in uniforms, they didn't yell. But they didn't ask either. They just took her." "And what did she do?" "She stood there," he whispered, like she was waiting for something bigger than them. A quiet pause. Tully nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Jones." Next, Grace Odell took the stand. She moved slowly, holding a thin folder of documents. From it she pulled a faded land title, dated 1964, bearing Evelyn's maiden name in blue ink. "This is the original deed to the Monroe property," she said, placing it gently before the judge. "Signed, notarized, and never contested until this year." Colborne shifted in his seat. The prosecution attempted rebuttal. They fumbled. No clear records. No consistent policy enforcement. The judge raised an eyebrow only once, when the city's attorney cited eminent domain procedural discretion, without referencing any statute. Finally, the video played. No edits. No commentary. No sound. Just Evelyn's arrest. The camera capturing her eyes as deputies placed the cuffs, her sign still leaning against the porch railing. "This land remembers us." The room held its breath. The image froze just before the screen went black. Judge Tully tapped his gavel once. "This court finds no basis for continued prosecution," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "These charges are dismissed. This never should have come to my courtroom." A murmur swept through the room. Colborne didn't rise immediately. He just stared at the bench, his hand tightening on the armrest. Evelyn stood, adjusted her coat, and walked out with the same silence she had carried in. On the courthouse steps, the crowd had thickened. News vans idled at the curb. People leaned over barricades, murmuring, some holding printed signs of solidarity, others simply watching. Then, a woman near the back of the crowd shouted, her voice sharp and cutting through the air, "They're coming for Riverside next!" The crowd turned. They came at 2:17 a.m., but the cameras had been rolling since midnight. Grace Odell had taken to sleeping with her boots on. The floor behind the bookstore counter was unforgiving, but it creaked the right way, and the back exit was always within reach. She stirred as the motion sensor tripped. No sound, just the silent flicker of a red diode. Upstairs, Malik stirred too. His hand went to his earpiece before his eyes opened. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The footage was already feeding through his laptop. 4 men, dressed as utility workers, approaching the side alley where the store's camera wiring ran. One of them bent down with a set of clippers. But as soon as metal touched plastic, the alley lights cut out. 30 seconds later, every screen in the shop switched to infrared. Malik watched, still and wordless, as the intruders faltered. Grace sat at the foot of the stairs, shotgun across her lap. She never raised it, just stared at the static. They left without a sound. At dawn, Malik slipped out the back and disappeared into the gray. The motel safe house he used smelled of bleach and carpet glue. He stripped off his hoodie, opened the back of a locked cabinet, and retrieved a manila folder wrapped in plastic. Inside, drone stills, accounting ledgers, infrared schematics, each page cross-referenced, every name underlined in red. Meanwhile, Rachel Chen stood at her kitchen counter in flannel and bare feet, staring at a burner phone lighting up with a single text. "Confirmed. He's from inside. Field Ops, Northern Division." She exhaled. It was real. The source, whoever he was, had sent proof. A whistleblower inside the Federal Zoning Authority. Embedded corruption. Reaching beyond Haddonridge. She downloaded the file, encrypted it twice, and dropped it into a flash drive taped under her coffee machine. That afternoon, Malik followed Colborne's patrol SUV to the edge of an industrial park. He watched from a rooftop vent as the sheriff met with two men in dark windbreakers, faces hollow, voices thick, with accents not from anywhere nearby. One man passed him a thin envelope. The other wore gloves, even in the humid air. Colborne didn't speak much. He just nodded. Across town, Officer Travers waited in his cruiser outside the old train station. His hands trembled slightly as he handed Rachel a plain envelope through the driver's side window. "Take this," he said. "Don't contact me after tonight." Inside, internal dispatch logs, body cam footage showing the arrest order for Evelyn signed retroactively, a chain of messages between the sheriff's office and Eden Properties legal counsel. Some emails were timed before the supposed violations even occurred. Rachel sat in her car for 20 minutes before starting the engine. That evening, Evelyn returned home on bail. Someone had repainted the porch. The color matched the old photograph Grace had kept behind her counter. On the steps were flowers, candles, a homemade sign with pressed magnolia petals. "Still here, still ours." She sat on the swing, didn't cry. Just folded the note Malik had left and tucked it into her coat. Malik stood down the block, partially shadowed by an elm tree. He didn't approach. Just watched the way the children down the street repainted their grandparents' mailboxes, how a deacon unlocked the church pantry for the first time in 6 months. Back at the motel, he slipped the final dossier into a fireproof envelope and walked it to a dead drop inside an old jukebox in the diner off Route 11. A contact in Atlanta would retrieve it by morning. Contents included a zoning map with properties marked Phase 2 Acquisition, a ledger showing wire transfers to Colborne's personal account, incorporation papers for W Syndicate Holdings listing addresses in Nevada and Dubai. He returned to the room, sat down. Malik opened his encrypted laptop. A new message flashed. "They know who you are. They're coming." The streetlights in Riverside flickered once, then stayed on. That was Malik's sign. It was early, too early for ceremony, too late for secrecy. The morning sky above Haddonridge was the color of a bruised peach, and the courthouse steps were slick with dew. Evelyn Monroe stood quietly by the railing, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee gone cold. No one asked her to speak. She didn't plan to. Down the block, Sheriff Wade Colborne sat in the back of an unmarked Crown Vic, his wrists in zip ties, his shirt still tucked, but his tie askew. Two federal agents stood nearby, trading clipped phrases into radios. The arrest had been clean, swift, unmistakable. Colborne had emerged from his front porch, only to be met by Officer Travers, badge clipped to his belt, voice steady. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to defraud the government, unlawful seizure of property, and obstruction of justice." Colborne laughed once, but no one laughed with him. Rachel Chen stood a few paces from Evelyn now, microphone pinned to her collar, camera crew setting up by the marble steps. Her phone buzzed constantly. The video of Caleb's testimony had hit 3 million views overnight, and now, national anchors were quoting her piece verbatim. Sometimes, the system isn't broken. It's designed wrong. The historical preservation order had come through just before sunrise. Riverside Crossing, once slated for demolition, was now protected under state code. Evelyn's home was first on the registry. A brass plaque would be mounted by week's end. But for now, Evelyn simply sat on the porch. She wore the same coat from the day she'd been arrested. The cuffs had been sewn back on. Malik watched from across the street, arms folded. He didn't step onto the lawn. Just observed as neighbors swept the sidewalk. Children hung handmade banners that read, "Welcome home," and "This land remembers." Grace appeared beside him without a word, handing him a warm biscuit wrapped in wax paper. He nodded once. She didn't linger. Later that day, Malik walked down Sycamore Avenue toward the station. He carried no bag, no badge, just a slim tin box in his coat pocket. At the corner near Caleb's house, he stopped. Caleb sat on the curb, sketchbook open, drawing Evelyn's porch from memory. Malik knelt beside him. "This is for you," he said, handing him the box. Inside, a dog tag engraved with a single call sign, GHOST6, and a flash drive labeled simply, "Remember." Caleb looked up, wide-eyed. "What's on it?" Questions, Malik said. The right kind. He stood and walked away. At the train station, Malik boarded without looking back. No ticket check. No salute. Just a nod to the conductor, who recognized him, but said nothing. The train pulled away slowly, carving a line through the early fog. Malik leaned back, eyes on the window, his reflection barely visible in the glass. There was no announcement, no send-off, just the hum of motion and the sense that something had finished exactly the way it should have. Back in Riverside, Evelyn's porch had become a kind of quiet shrine. People stopped by, not to speak, but to sit, to listen, to remember. The plaque on her gate gleamed under the rising sun. A new video begins trending. Evelyn reading on her porch, as the caption reads. She never raised her voice, but the whole country heard her. The wind moved softly through Riverside that morning, brushing past Evelyn's porch, like it remembered every step that had once shaken its silence. Malik was already gone, but his fingerprints remained, in the streetlights, in the eyes of a boy holding a tin box, in a mother who never needed to shout. Some victories don't come with applause. They come when the guilty are unmasked, when the silent are heard, and when land remembers the names it was meant to keep. Because justice doesn't always march. Sometimes it waits, watches, and then moves. If this story moved something in you, consider passing it on. Somewhere, someone is still waiting to be seen.